Hello everybody and welcome to the next installment of Azure Cloud Talk. We have a Brian-less episode today. We both actually just got back from MVP Summit up in Redmond, so it was my first time seeing Microsoft's campus, getting to talk and meet with some people from around the world actually of different things that we're all excited about. One thing that's really cool is I think it shows that we can all unite behind technology and just the changing of information, right? Like we might be in totally different parts of the world, totally different industries, but it was really cool and exciting to see that, hey, we're facing a lot of the same challenges and issues, whether it's documentation, whether it's figuring out how to do something originally, whether it's even just guidance. One thing that was a really interesting takeaway talking with other MVPs where I think the general guidance I've heard or read or saw online is when it comes to OpenAI models right now, you don't want to be training your own. Fine-tuning, just forget about it. And I actually heard from a few different people, they were in agreement that that is not necessarily the case anymore. That means you can start fine-tuning your own models. They're starting to say recommend it. The other thing is kind of RAG or Retrieval Augmented Generation has been the standard approach or recommendation, I believe, across the industry. That's getting easier and easier to the point that like you don't necessarily really need to think about it. But the thing that they're saying is that the models are smart enough now that with fine-tuning, I think the biggest hesitance was it would take a lot of data and the models were kind of held together with duct tape and bubble gum. So it was really easy for you to come in with your new data. You know, there's a Jenga block and you just try to shove your own block in there and now the tower fell down. And not only did you just spend a bunch of money to train it on that Jenga tower, but you now unfortunately don't have anything to show for it. So I think what I've been hearing from other MVPs is that's not the case anymore. The models are a lot smarter. You need a lot less data. And the models in general are smarter that you can also synthesize data. So I think the thing I've been telling people all along is with Retrieval Augmented Generation or the RAG architecture, you need very little data to actually start getting actionable insights. You can ask the model questions about you, your company, what have you. And at that point, it's so little data because it's supplemented by the LLM, right? I'm going to go fetch what I think is around what you're talking about, but it will come back and then supplement that with the LLM to further understand and think about what you asked. Whereas fine-tuning is a little different, right? You go in and you're basically changing the way the brain works a little bit. So for example, if I have Alec Harrison chatbot, or even for my website, Azure Barista chatbot, or even this podcast, Azure Cloud Talks, you would ask it, what company do you work for? If it's a bot in this case, and generically it would answer with, maybe you could have a document that would say, hey, this is the company you work for, yada, yada, yada. But the thing would have to go out and fetch that record. It'd have to go out and fetch your documentation to say, here's what it is. And even in that case, it might say, well, I'm a product of, if we're using ChatGPT, for example, I'm a product of OpenAI. But I have been augmented with data from Azure Cloud Talk or something similar for Llama, or put, your LLM provider here. Whereas fine-tuning is a little different, right? You can go in and maybe short circuit that brain to say, hey, you're a chatbot for Azure Cloud Talk. Your goal is to drive people different things. And instead of having to fetch that, you can go into there and train it. I look at the difference between RAG and fine-tuning as kind of like when you go to an exam, right? Fine-tuning would be the equivalent of when you study, you're taking practice tests, you're doing the homework, so that the time the exam comes, you can go ahead and just like recall those facts, recall how to do the exam problem, all that sort of stuff. It's in your brain. You don't need an external source to do that. Where RAG is basically like, hey, here's a logarithm or something to that effect of, or here's a random question that's multiple choice. Let me pull out my calculator. Let me pull out my Google. Let me pull out an AI model, right? I'm going to go out and fetch that data, bring it back, and use that to then pass that question. It's the same as like Microsoft Learn now, right? On the exam, some of those exams, they're all open book for LinkedIn Learning. Sorry, not LinkedIn Learning, for Microsoft Learn. So if you're going to take an Azure exam, for example, you can go ahead and search the question. So knowing the material or fine-tuning your own brain is a little less important as long as you know how to search the information. Because there's a lot of those questions, or maybe very niche ones, that it doesn't matter to you or in the real world that you can recall that instantly. It matters more that you know that that information is housed somewhere and what the page looks like. One prime example that I use every now and again is like the pricing for OpenAI models. the data security and data privacy information for OpenAI models or any sort of AI in Azure, right, with AI Foundry. Can I tell you off the top of my head exactly word for word what that page says? No. But can I Google it close enough that, or search on Microsoft Learn that when it pops up, I'm like, here's the page, I know it is, here you go answer your own questions, or let me go find that particular question that you're asking about. I think that's kind of the biggest difference here is fine tuning. Also, if a client or a customer comes to you and says, or your boss, I want an LLM for our company, isn't really an LLM for your company, right? It is a LLM that is supplemented with your data, whereas if you short wire the brain of the LLM, you can kind of override it and say, hey, here's exactly what you're going to answer with. Here's exactly what you're going to do. You don't have, the LLM kind of loses the ability to do some of that weird wackiness. Then you have to deal with some things like hallucinations, right? Which is what makes an LLM work, because that's the creativity piece. So you can adjust that a little bit, play with it a little bit, depending on your use case and how your company feels about doing that sort of thing. But I think that's really interesting that, we're seeing guidance change. We're seeing that the training costs of models are coming down. We're seeing models themselves come down. That it used to be that like GPT-4o mini is so cheap, just use RAG. Now I'm starting to hear from some MVPs that that's not always necessarily their first approach, which was really eye-opening to me. It's something I'm going to definitely dig more into, just because it's a whole different way of thinking about problems. If they're starting to say, hey, my whole business is helping people build LLMs or, leverage AI and help companies see the ROI on all that. And my first approach is no longer just use RAG pointed at your data. For me, that seems that there's a gap in my own personal knowledge. So I'll definitely be bringing that back to the podcast as I start to dig a little deeper in that, try to figure out where those boundaries are. I still think the easiest and quickest way to get off the ground is definitely look at samples. I actually just submitted a talk to Global AI Bootcamp in Memphis. So if you're looking for more AI help or more AI stuff, search Global AI Bootcamps. There's a few around the US. A lot of them are remote or are planning to make their content accessible remotely. You should definitely check those out. It's a great organization run by some awesome people. And I think all of that is to help uplift people for AI. I submitted 2 talks. One is RAG. I called it RAG to Riches, learning about your data. We might also use that in Azure Universe, so the user groups I help run. I also submitted the open source quick start. I forget the exact title, but as I keep exploring AI, there's more and more of these like pre-canned solutions out there that Microsoft supports or other third parties that are reputable will support. So you can go ahead and deploy a model, which is like AZD up, and you have a pre-canned environment demo, all that sort of stuff. I know even Lean Techniques, the company I work for, we have an offering where we'll help you chat with your data, for example. There's all these quick start things. Some are open source, or the majority of them that I'm going to point out are going to be open source, just so that you can go and say, hey, if your use case is one of the following, look at this sample. And then you can start seeing, okay, maybe you can get your boss or get the business or get the company to buy in on AI, right? Because if I can just deploy it and it takes me 30 minutes, and then I can start seeing, all right, is this model pointed at my data, getting me the metrics I need, getting me the graphs, helping me onboard people for a workshop? If all those barriers come down and you can start seeing returns, I think it's an easier thing to say, well, dev time to build this simple application took 30 minutes. It has an MIT license. We can use it and start tweaking it however we think. But then maybe you can start thinking broader across your industry, right? So maybe you have this little niche chat with your data. So the AI search example is one I point people to all the time. If you follow along with my content or have watched this, that's how I broke into AI and started doing stuff there. Is I just started playing with that, then going, okay, well, now how do I add another data source? How do I add more of my data? How do I get it on a cron? Maybe I don't want it in blob storage. What's the next step look like? That kind of stuff. It's a nice building block because then somebody build that foundation for you and you're not taking the time to, well, did I build a front end on an app service? Did I deploy all of my models that I need to? Did I figure out how to do text cracking? Which is, a lot of these are kind of solved problems. I'm not going to say they're forever set in stone, but there's a general rule of thumb on how to do text cracking with an ADA model. There's a general rule of thumb on how to index a blob storage container. Like all that stuff that it's great to know when you need to start venturing out and branching out. But Not necessarily if you're just trying to see what the hullabaloo is with AI and will it even give us a return on investment for our company. So I think that's another talk that I'm pretty excited about giving because there's just more and more samples coming out there. Brian Gorman and I run Azure Cloud workshops too, and I'm actually working on an infrastructure as code workshop for AI and Pulumi specifically. So I'll also probably plug that in there as well. But yeah, I think it's all a lot of fun. Personally, I had a blast going out there, learning about all the new stuff coming. And yeah, just getting to meet people too. It was interesting. It was my first summit ever since I've been an MVP. This should be my third year if I'm renewed. So it was cool meeting all these people that I have met online, that we've chatted about, that maybe we've helped each other troubleshoot issues or mostly helped me troubleshoot issues. And then getting to shake their hand and saying like, hey, so you're the person that answered my Discord message or all that sort of fun stuff. And it really helps with that human element. I think Brian would also agree, but it's very similar to reasons why I think conferences are fun too. You get to go and virtual conferences are great for accessibility, but sometimes you lose a little bit of that networking or feeling that emotional connection with people. It's different to shake somebody's hand and say, hi, I'm Alec, nice to meet you, versus I shoot you a DM and be like, hey dude, like we did this, the blah, blah, blah. It's just another way for us to interact online. So that was super fun. Super cool to meet a lot of those people, to see some other friends and faces too that I've met throughout the years. It was just a good time all around. I definitely recommend if you haven't submitted to talks, you should totally do that. Specifically, Memphis Global AI Bootcamp is looking for speakers, and Brian's Sci-Fi DevCon, I believe it's now called May This is the May is what I think he renamed it to. Don't tell Brian that I stumbled on that, but they'll be in the speaker notes. Those are great conferences to just get started. Brian's conference is awesome. It's super low stakes, super chill. He, I think, generally accepts everybody who submits. And it's really cool. I know some people don't like recorded content because they feel like they need to heavily edit it or they need to speak perfectly because it's recorded. But it's not like that at all. I definitely say if that gives you makes you super uncomfortable, just do a live one. Brian will make you kind of host it and do all that, which isn't a big deal. He'll just point a link to it. But I'd say at the end of the day, just do something like this. This is going to be super lightly edited, if at all, mostly with AI. I'll do a few cleanups here and there, and then we're going to publish and go to the show. That's kind of how I like to do it with Brian as well. It helps him out a little bit too with scheduling if he has the recording in hand. That way he doesn't have to be like, Alec, are you still going live at 11:59 on blah, 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 blah date, such and such a time? Then he can fit it in easier. And I think it's easier for everybody, right? Because then I send it to him, my contribution's done, I move on, I forget about it until he posts the ones, or I just start following up with it once all the content's out, but then I don't have to deal with it. But yeah, I think those are some great conferences that are coming around too. In-person conferences, I think Nebraska Code just announced to everybody Brian will be speaking there. I'm hoping to be there. So if you're planning on attending that, make sure to check it out. We might also have some conference friends coming on too to talk about different conferences, what that's like, what it's like hosting a conference, all that sort of fun stuff. Maybe even able to get some of you guys some promo codes. So if you're still listening at this point, tune in. Hopefully we can get you all some promo codes. One thing I will say, if anybody's listening to this and wants to learn more on AI 102 exam, feel free to DM me on any of your following channels. And I do have 10 LinkedIn Learning certifications or LinkedIn Learning trials. So I'm willing to give those out to anybody who wants to try, for example, my course or any other LinkedIn Learning course too. And there's a talk I'm putting together on that as well, to talk about like what my experience was like there, and all that sort of stuff. So if that's something you want to learn more about as well, let me know. I'd be happy to talk about it on the podcast. If you want to find the course, I'll also put that in the podcast description as well. And if you want a free trial to LinkedIn Learning, reach out to me, LinkedIn, email, text, however, carrier pigeon. Let me know, and I can send you a key to get you a free trial to LinkedIn Learning. I think it's a 3-month free trial. And you can kind of fill that out, see what it's like having a LinkedIn Learning membership, maybe follow a few courses, hopefully get a couple certs, and all that sort of fun stuff. But with that, I think we have a guest lined up for next week. So tune in for that. It's going to be awesome. Super excited for that. And Brian should be back as well. So we'll get back to our normal cadence. And yeah, podcast wise, I think there might be a few changes coming up. Nothing too crazy, and they're very much in the early stages of being thought through. So if there's any way you think you could help improve the show, or if any suggestions, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, leave a review. This is on YouTube. We are on your favorite podcasting network. I'm putting clips out there as well. There's even on my personal TikTok, all the little clips and snippets. So let us know if there's anything you think that could be improved better, but the format might be doing a couple changes here, and we might be changing, I'm not going to say content, but changing a few other things. But anyway, until next week, see everybody next time. Bye, everyone.